acting pastor at North Hills Community Church in Taylors, South Carolina. He is author of a new book called Love into Light, The Gospel, the Homosexual, and the Church. Peter, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
When is this book? Is this book out just here recently?
Yes, the ebook just came out a week or two ago, and the paper is coming out Friday.
Okay, so this is a brand new release. Well, what is the? Let's start big and work our way small. So let's take the broadest message that you want to communicate with this book. What would it be?
To help Christians both understand same-sex attraction and then understand how the church can approach this obviously controversial and sensitive issue with greater clarity, compassion, and biblical integrity.
All right, start with that first one. You mentioned understanding same-sex attraction. What is it that Christians need to know about that particular struggle?
I just looked at my own life. I had been pastoring for a couple decades and hadn't really thought through what's happening there. That's not a struggle I had, and so like many Christians, I just didn't think about it and didn't really talk about it other than maybe to condemn homosexuals. And I began meeting with individuals who struggled with same-sex attraction and hearing their stories. They were longing for help. The culture was screaming, this is who you are, this is your identity, you need to embrace your identity. And the more I listened to their stories, the more it sounded just like my story. The struggle was different, but our hearts are the same. And so that's what began to move me toward this subject. It's real people in my church who wanted help to break free from these attractions or this lifestyle. And I looked around and the church just seemed mute. It was either condemning or condoning, but there wasn't really a vocabulary like other issues.
So when you say, I think we know what condoning would mean. The Episcopal Church, for example, has by and large embraced same-sex attraction, homosexuality, as being a God-given desire, that it's different but on the same level as heterosexual desire in most people. But when you say condemning, the church is either condoning or condemning. How do you characterize the condemnation that you saw? Because you didn't see any middle ground. They either condoned it or they condemned it. What does the condemnation look like that you're talking about?
Well, the extreme form of that would be the big, the signs, God hates fags, the messages often viewing homosexuality as kind of the last train stop on the track to hell. Like when you get there, you've been, like Romans 1 describes, given over, but I think that passage has been misunderstood. In other words, it's almost viewed as a different category. I noticed this in our church. I talk about this at the beginning of the book. The testimonies that would be given in our church, we had a full range from people coming off of crack to people struggling with overeating to anger, porn, whatever. But we had never heard a testimony of someone who had been in bondage to same-sex attraction and was walking in freedom. What Paul describes in 1 Corinthians, as this is who you were.
Right.
And so I began to wonder, well, why isn't that happening in our church? Is either we don't have anyone or no one's willing to talk about it because it's viewed as a different category, almost a hopeless, once you get here, there's no hope for change. We're seeing something very different now. We're seeing people who who are coming to Jesus and breaking free from this bondage. And yes, they experience temptation just like any other struggle, but they're walking in victory.
Do you think God made them that way, Peter? God made people with same-sex attraction?
That's a great question.
That's why you're on, brother. That's why you're here.
Yeah, I would answer it with another question. Do you think God made an alcoholic that way? Do you think God made an angry person that way? Do you think God made, all of us have sinful propensities. We're born fallen. So there are aspects of us that are twisted and broken, and there are aspects of us that are reflective of the image of God. And so, yes, there in our fallenness, there are certain people who have propensities toward certain desires, and some of those are very sinful.
So homosexuality is a sin.
It is a sin. Acting on those homosexual desires is a sin. Just like being tempted to be angry is not a sin, but acting on that anger is. And that's the part the church, I think, has been really confused about and hasn't spoken clearly.
I want to give you an opportunity. I want to get into this more, but tell us about your book and then where people can go to find out more about it.
The easiest place is probably Amazon. Has the ebook as well as the paper, as I mentioned Friday. Also, we have a website, loveintolight.com, that will be out tomorrow that points out some of these same truths, as well as provides tools. I believe there are a lot of pastors like where I was and ministry leaders who want to know how to speak helpfully and faithfully. We have found our people embrace this and move toward those who are struggling, as well as it changes the way we deal with the politics. As you know right now, this is hugely controversial. So it helps us not back out of the controversy, but move into the controversy with greater clarity and compassion, which both of those are difficult to keep.
We're talking to Peter Hubbard. He is a teaching pastor at North Hills Community Church in Taylors, South Carolina, and his book is called Love into Light, the Gospel, the Homosexual, and the Church. You're listening to the radio program Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. I'm Tim Wildman with Ed Battagliano. Ed?
Yeah, and Peter, I wanted this, for some people are going to think I'm just being technical and trying to split hairs. I'm not. I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're saying. And it's very wise to answer the question as you did in terms of other sins as well, because we all in our fallenness and brokenness do wrestle with different weaknesses, different propensities towards, I might have a propensity towards sins A, B, and C. You might X, Y, and Z. Both of those, all those are a reflection of our brokenness. But you're not saying that God is the author of this brokenness. This is the result of the fall, right? So I'm trying to tease out the difference when someone says, well, this is the way God made me. You're not saying God is the author of, alcoholic propensity to alcoholism or homosexuality or anything else, are you?
No, that's a really good question. No, and we have to distinguish the two, because obviously God is not the author of sin. The part where it gets complicated is there are ingredients that feed same-sex attraction that are not sinful. Like the more men I meet with, for example, who struggle with same-sex attraction, often they are, I find, not always, often they are highly creative, very sensitive. Those things are not sinful.
Right.
Those can be beautiful God-given characteristics that can be used for the kingdom of God. The problem is they morph and mate with other, both sinful tendencies and our active heart, and they become sinful in acting out on same-sex attraction, if that makes sense. So to say God made them, well, God made that man or woman a particular way, and many of their characteristics are not sinful, but when they're put together with other characteristics, they can become that way, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think, let me ask you. You've written the book on this subject. I think sometimes those kinds of giftings, those areas of interest and personality traits, I think sometimes are immediately rejected as not being masculine. I'm not saying I understand how people come to see themselves as being homosexual or attracted to the same sex. I think it's a very complicated issue, but I think at least in part, there usually appears to be some sort of a sense that they are different from a very early age from other males, other boys, and that may be because they like music more than they like football. They're immediately called sissy, and that may begin some sort of at least one of the contributing factors of distancing themselves from their own masculinity. So there may be a need for our culture to understand that masculinity is not always being able to throw a good fastball, that someone who may be sensitive or someone who may rather play the piano or have, drawn to drama and acting, that's not necessary. That doesn't mean that they're sissies. It may just mean that they are men with those gifts. So what do you think about the fact that we do tend to categorize masculinity as being this but not that?
Very important point, and I touch on that one because we have these assumptions about gender that can feed into the problem. Yes, being a man is taking responsibility. That's very clear. But Jesus, the very one who cast out demons and flipped tables was the one who wept, and showed great emotion and was highly sensitive to children and to the plight of women and to the hurting. So I agree completely. Our culture has certain assumptions that if you're not, big and breaking things, that you're not a real man. And I have 4 kids, and all 4 of them are different. And as a parent, I want to be able to cultivate those differences without fear, and while still recognizing God made men and women very different.
Talking to Peter Hubbard, teaching pastor at North Hills Community Church in Taylor, South Carolina. Is that near Columbia? Where is that?
It's right next to Greenville. It's northern part of South Carolina.
And his book is called Love into Light, the Gospel, the Homosexual, and the Church.